So I have finally seen the Amazing Digital Circus, the last act. I actually went and saw this last night, but I didn't really feel like recording the review late at night because I didn't get home till like around 9 p.m. ish, and I was kind of super tired and didn't really feel like recording the review that day. So here I am now. It is the next day. I just uploaded a new video, so if you haven't already seen that, go check it out. I made a quick little video talking about my thoughts on the Fortnite Shattered event, so you can go ahead and check that video out after this one. But this video is mainly going to be my thoughts on the Amazing Digital Circus, the last act, and just my thoughts on it. So yes, I did go see this movie in theaters. This is actually two episodes. It is of episode 8 and episode 9. That is how they were able to put it in theaters. They were able to combine those two episodes into one, and so therefore it was like an hour and a half, so they were able to put it in theaters. And overall, it is a pretty solid finale, to say the least. Now, I don't know if I'm going to be able to make a reaction out of it. If you guys really want me to, I could probably just make a reaction, talk about some of the things that I thought worked and some of the things that I thought didn't work. I could maybe do something like that, maybe do like more of like a commentary type thing. But yeah, otherwise, I'm probably not going to react to the last act. But I just want to talk about my thoughts on it because, like I said, I saw this movie last night, and let me tell you, the theater I was at was like packed. I could not believe my eyes. It seems like more and more that I go to the theaters, it's for like YouTuber movies. Like a couple years ago, if you would have told me that like freaking some show, some like small indie show would have a packed movie theater experience, I would have laughed in your face. I would have been like, ain't no way. Or if you would have told me that like a YouTuber making a movie would have packed a theater, I would have been like, bro, get out of here. That sounds crazy. But here we are. This is the third time now where I have seen a YouTuber like movie type thing where the theater has been packed. The first time was with Iron Lung back in January. I saw that movie twice in theaters, and both times I'm pretty sure the theater was full. And then back in May, I saw Obsession, and that theater again was packed completely full, and it was like, what are we doing here? Where the movie theater experiences that I've been going to more and more seem to be for YouTuber related movies. Oh, and also the Backrooms that came out like a week or so ago that I almost forgot about. That movie theater when I went to go see it was like full. So it's like it seems like more and more that these YouTuber movies are being more popular than like the regular studio Hollywood movies, like Avengers movies or Star Wars movies or something like that. I'm pretty sure Obsession is actually doing more or doing better than Star Wars The Mandalorian and Grogu, that movie. But anyways, like I said, the theater I went to for the Amazing Digital Circus was completely packed, and the applause afterwards, like after the movie ended, the applause from the theater, you would have thought I would have just got done watching Avengers Doomsday. My nose is itching here. But yeah, because the movie ended and there was just a round of applause. Like I don't think I've ever been at a theater where I've had that big of an applause before. But yeah. Anyways, what I thought really worked in this finale was the ending of it because I think it ends up or it wraps it up pretty nicely. And I know in the title it says, "Do they escape?" Nah, they asses are stuck there forever. Because as we know, in episode 7 and 8, they were trying to find like an exit, especially in episode 7, there was like this whole thing of this adventure where they were like, oh, we can find an exit, we can do this, and there's this guy named Abel who is helping them find an exit, and then they ended up, or Jax ended up, ruining that plan by like pushing the red button, and they were all like, oh, you ruined our one chance of escaping. But they come to find out later on in this episode, episode 9, that they are in fact not technically real. They are instead digital copies of themselves. That was like a popular theory that was going on, like that was a super popular theory that I've seen on like Reddit and stuff like that, where they are instead not actual people, they're instead just digital copies of real people, and that theory ends up being exactly right on the dot because what they end up finding out is, or Kane ends up finding out like their real names, like all the people in the circus, he ends up finding out their real names because he ends up somehow surviving because we see the 5 of them because unfortunately Jax did end up abstracting like it has been building up to since like episode like 6. I'm pretty sure is when they started building up that Jax could abstract. Well, actually, turns out he kind of started going through a phase in episode 1 of the Amazing Digital Circus because that was back when Kaufmo abstracted. Y'all remember Kaufmo? Back when he abstracted in episode 1, we kind of get a flashback to that where after Kaufmo abstracts, Jax is kind of looking at himself in the mirror being like, you're not doing too well, buddy. You might want to change that. So yeah, it seems like he's been going through like a lot ever since Kaufmo abstracted. And we kind of get a backstory on Jax throughout this like episode, which is one of the things that I kind of think holds the episode back a little bit. Now, I think the first act of the episode, or like the first part of the episode, is pretty dang solid, where they're like all there in the circus and it's like grayed out and they're all like super sad and everything. That I thought was pretty dang nice because then you get this moment of them like trying to figure out how to rebuild it, and then you get this nice little moment with like Jax and what, or I guess I shouldn't really say nice because he's kind of just there alone while everyone else is like, you know, helping to like reform the circus somehow. He's just kind of there alone, and so he tries talking to Pomni about it. It doesn't go over very well because he walks up to her and then he's like, never mind, and then he leaves. And then one of the things that is kind of unfortunate is the fact that him abstracting happens off screen. Like we get this montage of them like rebuilding the circus and whatnot, and then after the montage is over, boom, Jax is abstracted and he's like that creature that we've seen before. He's like that black creature with like the, you know, bunch of eyes and whatnot. It just cuts to him running around the circus already abstracted. And I remember sitting there in the theater and there was someone next to me who was like, is that Jax? And I was like, holy moly, that's freaking Jax. Like they abstracted him off screen. Like we never even got a moment of him abstracting. It happened off screen. But it's not really that big of a deal. It's just kind of, you know, eh. And then the second act of the episode is kind of more focused on Jax and his backstory because Pomni ends up walking up to him. And one of the funniest moments in the show for me was when Pomni is like going to find the abstracted version of Jax and she pulls out a whole ass gun. Like, I'm not even kidding. She literally like is following the version of Jax that's abstracted and pulls out a literal pistol out of nowhere. And my theater just like lost their dang mind when that happened. They were like, hey yo, hold up. Because she pulls out a freaking pistol. You think she's gonna go like, you know, boom to Jax, but no, that's not what she ends up doing. She ends up just shooting the lights, so it's complete darkness, and she ends up going into Jax's mind. And then the second act of the episode is kind of just like Jax and his backstory and like how he kind of became the person who he is, because we end up going through Jax's memories and all that, and we end up going through like his memories with Ribbit and with Kaufmo, and we find out that the three of them were actually like pretty good friends, like Jax, Kaufmo, and Ribbit. They were all like really close friends, and it kind of seemed like there was something going on between Jax and Ribbit, and he ends up kind of like oversharing about his backstory with Ribbit, where he's like, oh, you know, I ended up like pushing my mom over and she never really got up, so I panicked and I ran away. And then he's like, oh, wait a minute, I'm kind of oversharing a lot right now. And then he turns to her and goes, yeah, none of that was true. You don't really have to worry about that. But if you ever tell anybody about that, I'm never going to speak to you ever again. So that kind of like confuses Ribbit because she thought that her and Jax had like something going on. And then Jax kind of like pushes her away, being like, yeah, no, that was all fake. I made all that up, you know. Oh well. And so Ribbit's kind of like, hey yo, hold up, what's going on here? And so she ends up abstracting, and then it's just Jax and Kaufmo. And then once Pomni shows up, we know Kaufmo ends up abstracting, and then that cuts to the scene of Jax being like, you're not looking too good. And then, yeah, Pomni ends up finding Jax in his mind, and I think she tries to like de-abstract him because she's like talking to him and like hugging him. So I think that was her way of trying to like Jax to de-abstract, which obviously doesn't end up working because the rest of the gang ends up pulling Pomni away from Jax, and that's really the end of that. But they don't really end up sending him to the cellar like they have with other versions of abstractions, because as we know, when someone's abstracting, Kane sends them down to the cellar, but they don't end up doing that with Jax. They end up building like this hut thing for him to stay in, and he ends up being like they end up like kind of taming him a little bit to where he's not really attacking anyone, he's just chilling. So yeah, they end up doing that, and like I mentioned, Kane is still somehow alive because, as we know, at the end of episode 8, he got deleted, but he didn't really get like permanently deleted because I guess as we on our like computers, when we go to delete stuff, they don't really get permanently deleted. Like when we delete something, it just kind of goes to like a recycle bin, and then once you delete it from the recycle bin, that kind of, permanently deletes. So he doesn't really get permanently deleted, he just gets sent to the void. So he's sitting there, and then he's all like, maybe I done messed up. He's sitting there like thinking to himself like, oh, maybe I was being a bit too hard on them, and they're happier without me, because he sees them all like chilling in the circus without him, because they do manage to rebuild the circus. They do manage to bring the color back into it and everything. And so he sees all that, and he's like, oh, wow, so they really were happier without me. And he's sitting there in the void, and he's like, dang, I really done goofed by trying to, like, torment them and like force them to go on these adventures when they never wanted to go on these adventures. Like, dang, I really done messed up. So he tears out the blue part of the AI that he had inside of him, because remember, he has the red part of the AI, and then he has the blue part of the AI, and we never really know who the blue part of the AI is. I'm thinking that it was Bubble, because once he removes the blue part of the AI, we never really see Bubble again. So I'm thinking that Bubble was the blue part of the AI that was inside of Kane, and Kane was obviously the red part of the AI. So he ends up tearing the blue part of the AI out of him, and so he ends up finding this like Wi-Fi signal thing. He ends up finding like this red door, and in the red door has the information of the characters' real names, like out in the real world. We end up finding that like Pomni's real name is like Abigail, and Ragatha's real name, I'm pretty sure, is Susie. I don't really remember all of the names. I might have to look it up. Give me a second. All right, I'm looking at the list right now. So yeah, Ragatha's real name is Susie J. Ackerman. Kinger's real name is Grant Best. Zubal's real name is Riley Versiles. I'm pretty sure that was how you pronounce that. Gangle's real name is Zoe Rajavan. Pretty sure that's how you pronounce that. And Jax's real name is Leroy Mateo. And Pomni's real name was, like I said, Abigail Brooks. So Kane ends up finding all the characters' real names, and so he basically just ends up going back to the circus, and obviously everyone sees that Kane is back, and they're like, you better stay the hell away from me, you psychopath. And Kane is like, I'm here, too bad, so sad, deal with it. No, I'm just kidding, that's not what he says. He ends up like apologizing to them. He ends up being like, yo, I done goofed, I messed up real bad, you guys don't really have any reason to trust me, but these adventures, they're going to be open whether or not you want to go to them. That's up to you. And he basically kind of like rebuilds their trust by revealing everyone what their real names are. Like, he ends up revealing it through like this presentation thing, and everyone's all like, well, I guess we're stuck here forever then, because we're not technically real. We're just copies of real life people, but we ourselves aren't real. So they're just like, oh well. And they just live their life in the circus, and they kind of like mimic what the people in the real world are doing. So basically, Zubul ends up opening like their own little restaurant thing inside the circus, because they end up finding out that their real life self was like this super successful like restaurant owner. So they end up like making a restaurant in the circus, and then Gangle was like this person who was like a comic book artist type thing. So she ends up, drawing comic book stuff in the circus. So they end up basically just doing what their real life selves were doing, but in the circus, because they realize that they're not going to escape. They're going to be stuck there forever because they're just digital copies, and the people out in the real world are still out there living their life. So basically what ended up happening was they ended up putting on the headset in like the real world, and then they got their brain scanned and all that, and then they just went, took the headset off and continued living their life. And the brain scans ended up just like creating a digital copy and putting that into the circus instead. So the people in the circus cannot escape because they're not technically real. So yeah, even though, characters like Jax and Ribbit and Kaufmo, even though they have abstracted, their real life counterparts are still out there in the real world just chilling, living life. They're perfectly fine. So, yeah, at the end of the day, abstracting isn't really that bad because, the real life characters are still out there in the real world. So, yeah. Also, a nice little moment towards the end of the film was that there's like this post credit scene after the credits where it shows all of them in the real world. Like it shows the whole cast of characters, but like their real life versions chilling at a bus stop. And it's so ironic because they are all sitting there and they have no idea who they are in real life, like they don't know each other in real life, but like it's funny because their characters in the digital circus are all like best friends. They all like love each other. They're all best friends, but they have no idea who each other are in the real world. So I just find that kind of ironic. But yeah, you do get a shot of them in the bus stop in real life, chilling all next to each other, just not knowing who any of them are. So yeah, that was a nice little moment. But like I mentioned, I do like the first act and the third act, where the first act is them rebuilding the circus and whatnot. The second act is mostly spent in the mind of Jax and whatnot, although there are some pretty funny moments when they are in Jax's mind. There's like moments where there's like other characters abstracting, like Ragatha and Zubul, and one of the loudest moments in my theater was when Jax was like, hey Zoom, he like walks up to Gangle, who's like in her like happy phase, from like episode 4 where she has like the happy mask on and all that, and then Jax like walks up to her and is like trying to get freaky with her. He's like, here's the key to my room, I'll see you later. And my theater's just lost it. It was like one of the funniest moments in that scene where he's just like gives her a key to my room and is like, I'll catch you later. And everyone's like, hey yo, what the hell's going on here? So yeah, that was a pretty funny moment, and then that obviously leads to the scene of Pomni finding the real Jax in his mind and all that stuff. I do think the second part or the second act of the movie is like the weakest out of the three, but it does have a really strong ending, which, like I mentioned, Kane like reconciles with the group. They're all like, all right, you know what? I guess you're cool now since you're not trying to kill us anymore, and you're gonna let us do what we want. So they end up, making up with him, and they play baseball with him, and they Zubul ends up like opening the restaurant, like I said, and is like giving drinks to Kane and stuff. So they end up making up by the end of the show, and like I said, they end up just living their lives in the circus, and that is it. And it's kind of crazy saying that because this show has been running for 3 years. It started all the way back in 2023, and it's so crazy to see how far it has came because the first episode has, I think, like over 400 million views. And like I said, the theater I went to was packed. Not only with kids, because I know this is like a very popular thing with kids, but there was also adults in the show as well. It's not like I was the only adult there. I'm 22 years old, but there were plenty of other adults who were older than me, even though they were probably just parents of the kids, but there were also like other adults there who weren't just parents of kids. So I wasn't the only adult there, thank goodness. But yeah, overall, it was a pretty decent finale, to say the least. If I had to rate it, I would give it like an 8 out of 10. It was pretty dang good. Like I said, that second act is just kind of meh with them going into Jax's mind, because that takes up, I think, probably half of the episode is just spent in the mind of Jax. But it's kind of okay, because like I said, it's the backstory of Jax and Ribbit and Kaufmo and how they're friends and how their friendship ended up falling apart. It wasn't terrible. It was pretty good. But I think it was the weakest out of the other 2 acts in the movie. But yeah, I think overall that is going to wrap it up for this video. We are only 99 subscribers away from 800. We are at 701. So if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you subscribe. I'm trying to hit 800 subscribers by the end of 2026 because I already hit 700 subscribers, which I just want to say thanks for getting me to 700 subscribers, because it took over like a year of grinding. I hit 600 on May the 19th, I'm pretty sure, of last year, and then I finally hit 700 subscribers like 2 days ago, and so now I'm at 701, so I would like to see if I can hit both 700 and 800 subscribers this year. So if you haven't already subscribed, make sure you hit that subscribe button. And like I said, if you want, I could possibly make a commentary of the last act once it comes out on YouTube around like the 19th of June, I'm pretty sure. So once it ends up dropping on YouTube, I can talk about it a bit more and what I thought worked and what I thought didn't work. I can maybe do something like that, but we'll just wait and see what happens. But that's going to wrap it up for this video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. If you've gotten around to watching the last act in theaters, you can let me know what you thought of it. And yeah, that is going to wrap it up for this video. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace out.